Why showing off is the worst thing you can do. Machiavelli. There is something curious about the rush to show what we have. Seneca spoke of the man who, by displaying his gold in the streets, attracted more thieves than admirers. He believed that by showing off, he would gain respect, but without realizing he was only attracting the hungry gazes of those who wanted to take what wasn't. It's the same in the silent game of human relationship. The more we shout our worth, the more we reveal the fear that no one will notice it on their own. Epictetus reminded us that he who is truly rich does not need to convince anyone of it. True wealth, be it of character, spirit, or vision, is not a coin to be displayed, but a presence that is felt, even in silence. And yet, how many times do we give in to the impulse to prove? How many times do we rush to talk too much, to show off too much, to fill the space with gestures that were not born of naturalness, but of the insecurity of not being seen? There is an almost invisible pain that inhabits this movement, the feeling that if we don't show, we will be forgotten. It is a silent wound that pushes the soul onto the stage even when it just wanted to rest in the audience. We believe that presence is built with noise, that relevance is sustained by constant exposure, as if every instant of silence were a step toward disappearance. But paradoxically, it is silence that often makes presence grow. The dangerous illusion is in confusing movement with meaning, like the traveler who runs from city to city just to collect passport stamps, but who never stays long enough to get to know the essence of each place. We begin to treat our achievements and virtues as pieces in a storefront. We forget that what is shown all the time becomes common. The extraordinary is only extraordinary because it is rare, because it holds some mystery, because it doesn't give itself away all at once. And perhaps the real value lies precisely in this, in not needing to show anything for it to exist. Like the deep root that keeps the tree standing without ever showing itself, or the protected flame inside an oil lamp that illuminates without seeking. Silent greatness does not hurry, does not beg, does not shout. It is showing off as an emotional trap. The need to prove one's worth is like a bottomless pit. The more you pour into it, the more it demands. At first, it seems innocent. One more gesture, a well-placed word, a deed that we hope will be recognized. But we soon realize that on this path, every attempt to assert our importance turns into a reminder of our own insecurity. What could have inspired respect begins to generate something closer to pity or even boredom. Seneca said that nothing is more empty than glory won through the eyes of others, because this type of glory is not based on who we are, but on what we are able to convince others that we are. It's like living in a house made of mirror. Everything seems grandiose until the light changes and reveals the crack. And the more we get used to seeking this reflect, the more fragile we become in the face of the slightest look of disapproval. I think of the story of an artist He painted out of passion, vivid colors, intense stroke, scenes that seemed to breathe on the canvas. In the beginning, every painting was a piece of his soul, and every brushstroke a dialogue with something greater than himself. But over time, his art began to be born not from what he felt, but from what he believed would sell. The colors lost depth. The paintings began to look like calculated repetitions, and his gaze no longer carried the same spark. He no longer painted to express, he painted to be applauded. And in that moment, his art ceased to belong to him. This is the trap of showing off, trading essence for appearance. In the short term, it can attract glances. In the long term, it empties you out, because attention bought through excess is not solid. It dissipates as soon as something louder, more eye-catching comes along. It is the fate of one who relies on others' approval, to live at the mercy of the next judgment, next comparison, the next fad. The danger lies in not realizing that in the quest to prove our worth, we end up forgetting what really gives us value. And when that happens, the silence we so feared ends up finding us in a much more painful way. The paradox of excess, when showing too much, reduces value. There is a silent principle in the game of power that Machiavelli would understand well. A power perceived as absolute is more feared than a power that begs to be recognized. The instant we feel the need to demonstrate in an excessive way that we are capable, we have already let the first fissure slip out. It is as if the very act of showing off were a confession that the thing is not as solid as we would like it to seem. Value, like rare jewels, is nourished by scarcity. A precious stone displayed every day in the window of every corner store soon ceases to be admired. The eye gets used to it, the enchantment fades, and what once sparked fascination becomes just part of the scenery. The same thing happens with our virtues, talents, and achievements. When they are turned into a constant spectacle, they lose the aura of rarity that made them special. How many times, driven by the anxiety of being understood, do we pour out unnecessary explanation? How many times, even before we are questioned, are we already defending something that no one has attacked? This is the paradox of excess. By trying to prove too much, we end up giving away clues to our insecurity. It's as if, with each extra word, a layer of mystery unraveled. True power, on the contrary, does not shout. It imposes itself by the weight of what does not need to be said. It is the wind that shapes the stone without ever showing itself completely. It is the sea that does not need to prove its depth with every wave. It is the presence that does not need spotlights to be felt. Ultimately, the strength that remains is the one that is kept. Showing too much is inviting the other person to reduce what they see to what they understand. Keeping the essential is allowing the other person to feel that there is more, much more, than what can be seen. And this more is what sustains true authority. Silence as a strategy of authority. There is a different weight to words that emerge after a long silence. It is as if each syllable carries the density of the time that preceded. Marcus Aurelius said that speaking only what is necessary turns silence into something more respected than 1,000 speeches. And yet, we live in a time when the emptiness of a pause is confused with weakness, and the excess of sound with strength. True silence is not an absence, it is a measured presence. It is the gaze that does not need to justify itself. It is the conscious choice not to enter into small battles in order to conserve energy for the wars that matter. It's like a lake that reflects best when it is not agitated. Only when the surface calms down can we see the whole sky there, without distortion. So too is authority. It is only fully perceived when there is no visible effort to impose it. There is a powerful breaking of expectations in this type of posture. People expect the person of value to always be in motion, always responding, always reaffirming what they are. But when that reaffirmation doesn't come, when silence occupies the space that would be filled by noise, something happens. The other person begins to fill in the gaps with their own imagination. And imagination, almost always, is more intense than any exhibition. Silence is also a filter. It reveals who is genuinely trying to understand and who is just looking for immediate stimulation. Those who are bothered by absence are generally not interested in the essence. Those who remain find in silence a form of dialogue that is deeper than word. And paradoxically, it is by refusing the haste to explain yourself that your value grows, because the authority that is built in silence does not depend on convincing. It is sustained by what already is, by what already exists, even if no one is watching. The internal reconstruction that eliminates the need to prove. What holds someone up is not the height of their walls, but the depth of their foundation. True security is not born from the external gaze, but from the solid ground on which one's own soul rests. It is the invisible fortress made of values, convictions, and clarity of purpose that keeps a man unshakable in the face of applause or criticism. When this internal foundation is firm, the need to prove anything simply disappears. There are those who spend their lives trying to erect towers to be seen from afar, believing that height is synonymous with strength. But these towers without deep root fall with the first strong wind. Internal reconstruction is different. It is not built to be displayed, but to sustain. It is silent, patient, almost imperceptible to the eyes of those who seek a spectacle. However, it is precisely this invisibility that makes it immune to the tides of approval and rejection. The process begins with a subtle shift from asking, "What will they think of me?" to asking, "What do I think of myself?" This inversion is the key. It removes the anxiety of seeking recognition and returns autonomy over one's own worth. It's like keeping a secret that doesn't need to be revealed to exist. It remains whole, even without witnesses. When we stop measuring our importance by the reflection in the eyes of others, something changes in the rhythm of life. We walk slower, but more firmly. We speak less, but with more weight. And this change is felt, even if it is not announced. The strength that is born from within does not seek a stage. It illuminates even when no one is looking. In the end, internal reconstruction is not about shielding oneself from the world, but about creating a space so solid that nothing external can become its owner. And it is in this self-possession that the rarest freedom resides, the value that is not for sale. Some things simply cannot be put up for sale, not because they have no price, but because they would lose their meaning if they could be bought. Seneca reminded us that true greatness is felt, not announced. It is a presence that needs no label, a force that requires no certificate. When something is authentic, it does not depend on a storefront to exist. To show off is to depend. To remain whole is to choose. This is the fundamental difference between living to be seen and living to be. He who depends on showing off to prove himself ends up living like a merchant of himself, always adapting the product to please the customer of the moment. But he who remains whole understands that real value is in constancy, not in exhibition. It's like a fountain that continues to flow even in the absence of witness. Its existence is not justified by applause, but by the very nature of flowing. Epictetus said that to be invincible, you must not depend on what is not within your control. And others' approval, no matter how seductive it may seem, is precisely one of those uncontrollable things. When we give up seeking it, we do not become indifferent but free. And this freedom is not noisy. It is silent, like a flame that burns constantly, even when no one is around to see its light. In the end, the question that echoes is simple but immense. If no one could see, what would still have value for you? Perhaps the answer reveals what truly deserves to be protected. Because what resists the absence of applause is what carries meaning even in the dark. It is the flame that remains lit when all other lights go out. It is what remains when everything else has already left.